Hi, good evening, everybody. It's Richard Askam here with the fourth, I think, now in the series of our Grimbarians lockdown talks. And I guess nearly 4 months in since we started this, we're getting towards the sort of nearly the end of lockdown talks, or at least that's how it's starting to feel. So I thought tonight that the best person to talk to about how lockdown is going to be on the other side is somebody who has a very successful business, which has been mothballed now for 3.5 months, like all of us. And I guess what we need to hear a little bit is what the comeback is going to look like and feel like. But also, more than that, a bit of the history about the man himself. I guess you'll all know this particular gentleman when I introduce him. He's pretty well known in these parts. In fact, I'm sitting here drinking one of his drinks. So without further ado, can I introduce my guest for this evening, the king of craft and the man, I think, who put the docks back into Grimsby. Good evening, Mr. Will Douglas.
Good evening, Richard. Thank you for that introduction. What an introduction.
Wow. It's almost like I prepared it, which, as you know, I never do. So, but I'm delighted not only to see you, but also to see you sitting there in that little old brewery of yours.
Oh, it's still going and we're still brewing. So yeah, no, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And you say you're still brewing. So, I mean, has that been continuous throughout lockdown or is it something that you had to stop and start?
Well, we admittedly had to scale back, but we have consistently been brewing throughout lockdown. One of the things that happened as lockdown came and we lost about 98% of our income overnight was that we realized quite quickly that we needed to pivot the business towards e-commerce because the customers that come to the tap room, they weren't going to be able to come. So we hoped they'd want to get their Docks Beers fix. And so the website, the docksbeers.com website became a major source of attention for me and for Source 4 who built it, and our e-commerce team up the road on Paul Beattie and his team up the road who's been really, really helpful for us. So yeah, we've been brewing, making new beers. I think we're about to launch our third or fourth new beer of lockdown next week. And we've launched a couple of new products. So we've launched a gin during lockdown, a maritime gin, and we've also launched a rum called Stevedore. So yes, it's been challenging, but we're very lucky to have had that additional revenue stream come in from the website, because without that, we might have been a little bit stressed and scuppered.
Yes, no, I can understand that.
Cheers.
I've got a bit of echo going on in the background. Is that I can hear my voice in the back of your brewery? That feels nice for me. So just for a moment, Will, let's imagine that somebody who's watching this has just got back from the International Space Station and has been there for the last 18 months and has no idea who you are or what you do. So tell that person who you are and what you do.
Okay, so I'm Will Douglas. I was born in London in 1972. My mum was from Grimsby and she met my dad at university at Canterbury, and they got married and settled in London. So that's why I was born there. And I've been coming to Grimsby throughout my life to see my grandparents and my uncles and aunts and cousins, and have always loved coming up here. This resulted in me leaving London when I was 40 years old, moving up here. I'd met the girl of my dreams from Grimsby, Kate, and settled down and got married to Kate in Grimsby, and I now live in the house next door to where my parents live. So I've sort of come kind of full circle.
That's it, absolutely perfect. And you mentioned your grandfather there, who's quite the well-known name in Grimsby. I don't know whether there'll be many people left alive, particularly that would remember him, but I think most people would know his name. Your grandfather was? He
was Frederick Ward. So you'll have heard of Frederick Ward Way. And that was named after him. He was what was then called the town clerk of Grimsby, and that's the role that's now fulfilled by the chief executive. So that was what he was doing in the early through the 70s, I think.
Okay, so you are in your DNA a Grimbarian.
I believe so firmly. Cut me and I bleed, black and white.
Good lad. And I know you were one of the first people, I think, that Dan Clark, who is the curator of the Grimbarians project and the founder of the Grimbarians project. I think you were one of his first studies, weren't you, when he was doing the early portraits?
I think so, yes. It was great to meet Dan. We had one of the first sort of arts and culture things that we did at Docks Beers was to host the Grimbarians exhibition of Dan's portraits. And we had about 20 of them actually in this space, and we had open evenings. It was very popular. It was great to meet Dan through that process. So yeah, no, it's
and funnily enough, I think
a great project, and I think it's fantastic to celebrate Grimsby, because I think it's about Grimsby really as much as the Grimbarians. It's putting Grimsby on the map, and that's what we've got to do.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think I have you to thank as well, because I think you introduced me to Dan. So as is often the case in Grimsby, it's not a small town, it's a big village, and that works well and has done and will continue to do for many a year to come. Now, you mentioned this space. You mentioned this space. Tell me a little bit about what's going on behind you.
Okay, so, well, first of all, I should say we're in a church, for those that don't know Dock Spears. This is the ground floor of our building that was a church up until the mid-50s. And we found it in 2017, and we began to convert it in 2018. And in October 2018, we opened this, what we call a 15-barrel brewery. We've got 4 fermenting tanks there and 2 fermenting tanks over there. And our brew kit's down the end there, you can see over my shoulder, and that's where all the brewing happens, and where the barley is mashed in with hot water and hops are added, and then it's all transferred to the vessels here with the conical bottoms, and that's where it's fermented. So yeah, we started installing this kit in 2018, and it was quite a challenging process, because the church was, well, it was a removals company storage depot.
Yeah.
And so it was piled high to the rafters with people's pianos and wardrobes and chests of drawers, so on and so forth. And not just on this level, but upstairs as well. I don't know if you remember that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Ark is wheeled on a pallet truck down these aisles.
I do.
It looked very much like that upstairs. So you really had to have the imagination to see beyond what was here at the time. But we thought it was a really iconic building from the outside. It was a bit of an ugly duckling. Some might say it still is. I think we've changed it fabulously. But that shape of the building from the outside, I'm going to lean over here now and get one of our bags that's been pre-packed for tomorrow, on Saturday's click and collect. You can see here, the building has become part of the logo.
Yep.
It was all part of the design, and we're on a forgotten street, really, King Edward Street, which really was one of the main arterial routes of Grimsby back in the day. There used to be thousands of dock workers' houses along King Edward Street and off King Edward Street, and 15 pubs. And now they were demolished in the 60s, I think, to make way for the sort of light industrial buildings around here. And yeah, it's changed a lot, but we wanted to be in a building that was close to the docks, so we could brew our beer that was close to the docks and be called Dock Spears, because we celebrate the docks not just because of Grimsby, which of course is, you know, firmly part of its heritage and the future, but also because the docks are the docks wherever you go in the world. So there's docks in London and Manchester and Liverpool and New York and Riga, and we felt that people would understand the docks imagery and the names behind our beers, regardless of where they bought them. So that's why we're called Dock Spears, and we're brewing in a church by the docks.
And I think that's, you know, and you and I met actually, I think in the summer of 2018, strangely enough well, actually didn't meet at a speaking event at Forest Pines. I think it was Humber Biz Week event, and I was speaking at that event, and so were you, but we didn't actually meet on the day. I think you were patrolling one side of the car park, and while I was on stage, and I was probably in the car park while you were. So we never actually got to meet on that day. But I remember seeing shortly after, a couple of days after the launch really of Dock Spears as a brand on Twitter, and sending you a very simple note that just said genius branding, because I think what you did at the time, your intention to connect your business and your product back to the lifeblood really of Grimsby was genius. And I, you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're ace, but you're ace. But I think what you've done very, very cleverly and very, very quickly is re-energized a population around the heritage of the town that they're in, not necessarily the business that town's heritage comes from. In other words, you're not about the fishing industry, but you're about the industry that created the town. Is that fair to say?
100%. 100%. I mean, we like to say that we're not just looking back at the heritage of the town, which is hugely important. The fishing heritage of Grimsby is, of course, something that you can never forget. But equally, the future and the present is all about the renewables, offshore wind industry, reviving the docks, literally 200 meters up the road here with Orsted, companies like that. And the docks is becoming once again a thriving place that is going to drive forward the economy of the town, which is so exciting. It's a real opportunity for the town with everything that's happening. And we might come on to talk about, you know, the government investment later on, but all of this stuff is percolating in a really, really positive and exciting way. And I think this town is set for a major transformation in the next 3 to 5 years.
No, I totally agree. And, you know, it's a little strange. And I guess you have to sort of open your mind to the notion that fish used to be landed at Grimsby docks, and now electricity is landed at Grimsby docks. And so, you know, it doesn't really matter what's being landed as long as it's being landed at Grimsby docks. So,
and
you know,
cars, a lot of cars, but I like to think in the future there'll be electric cars.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we know somebody between us as a mutual friend who would encourage that. So we'll talk to her another time. So
she'll probably crop up later, actually.
Yes, quite possibly. She always does. Do you know, I've done 4 of these interviews now, and she manages to get into all of them. So I'm not, you know, not. Maybe it's time I spoke to her, I think. But so take me back a little bit then, Will, before the world of beer. And you said that you were born and grew up in London and spent a chunk of time there. Doing what?
So I went to school in London. I then went to university, actually at the same place my parents went, Kent University. I then left university and did work experience in the independent radio production sector. And I ended up working for 6 years in a company that made, an independent company that made programs for all networks of BBC Radio. So I started at sort of runner level and made my way up to production assistant and production coordinator, and then up to producer, an executive producer, latterly. And we made all sorts of programs from, we brought Stephen Burkhoff to his radio drama debut in Burkhoff's Macbeth for Radio 4. We worked with Barry Norman, the late Barry Norman, on a quiz, cinema quiz. We worked with Ned Sherrin on a review of Victorian Review, and Lionel Richie on an 8-hour serial about the contribution of black people to popular music. So we had this incredibly rich variety of programming, which was really, really, really fulfilling to be involved with. But I decided after about 6 years that I wanted to earn a little bit more money. I didn't think that it was going to set me up for life. And so I transitioned from that into the corporate sector and started making audio programming for big companies, and it was then broadcast, if you like, on phone systems. So internal communications, the staff of a big company would ring into a phone number and listen to the audio that we had made, that I brought in BBC radio producers and presenters to present. And we worked with Martin Lewis, the Martin Lewis. He was one of his early jobs with us. And lots of other radio presenters that basically enhance the process of making what can be very boring stuff for the staff of a big company to listen to. So yeah, it was all about audio to start off with. And then I transitioned again and sort of went to the supplier of the phone systems, who was involved with providing very early cloud telecom solutions. So that's where your telephony system is hosted on a computer rather than having a switch and a big bank of phones. It would all the phone calls would come in and go out on the internet. And the benefit of that system was that it also was very useful in the world of SMS and texting. And my MD of that company created the UK's largest text dating service. This was before internet websites. This was before Tinder. I think I stop at Tinder because that's what I was last using when I was single a long time ago. I'm sure there are many other.
Don't tell the wife.
Sorts of other dating apps that you can use. But this was sort of early doors, and it was massively successful. And people would text in their profile, 160 characters, and that would then be circulated, and people would respond to those profiles. And I found that very exciting. And did that for a bit. And then I had a calling, which was to try to use that to create I can't talk about it very much actually because it's top secret, but we wanted to do a tech startup that basically brought back into the 21st century one of the last remaining services that is essentially completely anarchic and based on Victorian technology. And it was going to be something that would completely revitalize the way we communicated. Sadly, the institution that we wanted to work with didn't want to play ball, and we tried long and hard to make that work. But after a while, I could see that it probably wasn't going to happen, at least not quickly. So I had a window of opportunity. By this stage, I'd moved up to Grimsby. Well, this is where it all leads into the brewing, really, Richard.
Yeah.
I have a cousin who runs a shop in Cleethorpes, Charles Lumley, and Charles's shop, Message in a Bottle, is a very good specialist beer shop, and he has the best selection of beers from Lincolnshire and a great selection of worldwide craft beers as well. And I went there quite a lot because he had a pop-up bar at the weekends, and my favourite beer that he had there was a beer which I can run and get, but I won't, I'll stay here. It's one of our original beers, Cleethorpes Pale Ale.
Yep.
And I drank a lot of Cleethorpes Pale Ale. I really liked it because it took the name of a place that was dear to me. Mm-hmm. And it was brewed with a local ingredient. It had sea buckthorn berries that had been foraged off Cleethorpes Beach. And I thought that's just lovely. I bought it because it was a local product, supporting local, wanting to enjoy something from the area. And after a while, one day, Charles messaged me and said that the brewer was looking for investment. He needed investment, and otherwise things were going to be a real challenge. And that's the point at which I said, well, it can't be the beer that's the problem, because the beer is great. And I would be devastated if this beer disappeared from my life. So I thought about my current situation and thought, I really do have a bit of a gap here, a bit of a window of opportunity. So I met up with Shaz, my now fellow director, and Charles, and we concocted a plan to meet the brewer and see if we could get involved. We thought initially with a little bit of money and a bit of time to build up this business and maybe make a brewing business for Grimsby, because there was no brewery in Grimsby, which I found impossible to believe, because Hewitt's, which ceased to be in the 60s, was one of the biggest in the country.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was, and funny enough, where my parents used to work and met and got married and became my parents was Hewitt. So yeah, at the time, as you say, it was a big concern, but there's been nothing since, which is quite unusual. So that gap you spotted was clear.
I don't want to do a disservice to the other breweries that are on the peripheries of Grimsby. And there was a brewery briefly here, but nothing had stuck. And I just couldn't see that made sense for a town of our size. I mean, what is it when you include the outer?
It's 160,000 in the borough, I believe.
Which is a big number of people not to have a brewery. So we thought, well, if we could build something that would be able to be transitioned to Grimsby, then we stood a pretty good chance of success. And we had to fight quite hard to start off with, because Mike had scaled back brewing a lot and didn't have many customers when we joined. Well, he had a lot of customers, but customers that hadn't bought for a while. So we had to build that back up. And selling to pub landlords when you're a new brewery, that is one of the hardest things I've ever had. It really is. Because they get hundreds of phone calls every Monday, Tuesday from breweries like us, bigger and smaller, selling beer. So you're just one voice in a myriad of voices. And I think it's fair to say we very, very nearly gave up, because it was such hard work getting the sales. And then we had a good month. And that good month turned the tide and our attitude. And we'd already realized that the little bit of time and the little bit of money we thought it was going to be, well, a great deal of time, 24/7. Yeah. And much, much more money than we'd originally envisaged. But we plodded away. And from very early doors, we decided we would like to get a brewery in Grimsby. So we were looking, and we wanted to have a new brand that would take us away from that real ale Askam Brewing Company, of course, that's the first time I've even mentioned the company that, as the company name is, Askam Brewing Company. It's based in Kroll in Scunthorpe. We wanted to create a company and a brand that could brew craft beer.
Yep.
So canned, very carbonated, very, very hoppy beers, which is the sort of the new wave of beer that BrewDog really championed here. Now, BrewDog, without any shadow of a doubt, BrewDog, for those that don't know, is the most successful craft beer brewery in the UK. BrewDog sells more craft beer in the supermarkets than all of the other 2,500 craft brewers combined. They've got breweries in America and Germany. They're all over the world.
Yep.
We're very impressed by BrewDog. There's no debating that.
And craft beer, just for those that don't know, Will, craft beer, because I think a lot of people hear the word craft beer and imagine it's something that you sort of make in the airing cupboard under the stairs, and it's sort of like a hobby, but it's a description of the way that it's brewed. So just give me the 30-second difference between real ale and craft beer.
The real ale is it's a live product, and it's served in casks, and it is served through a manually operated hand pull, which is the hand pumps that you see on the bars. Yep. It's a live product, and when you tap the cask of beer to get the hose into the line into it, that effectively lets air get at that beer, and that beer then goes off very, very quickly. There's not a huge amount of hops in it, and the hops that are in it aren't particularly varied traditionally. Whereas craft beer is using a lot more hops. It's using carbonation, forced carbonation, to create the fizziness, which helps that hoppy taste. But also it's served in and dispensed in sealed, airtight kegs where the air can't get in. So the product lasts a lot longer as well. So you've got this longevity of product and a total different taste, both mouthfeel and taste as well, and aroma as well. Yep. So they're chalk and cheese. Yes. They're both great. I drink both. But Doc's Beers is all about the craft beer, whereas Askam still carries our real ale brand.
Yes,
our real ale range, if you like.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. So you were looking. You found the building. You were looking around for the brand. When did the name Doc's Beers come into your world?
I reckon it came into the world around October 2017, a year before we opened. We definitively wanted to trademark whatever we were going to do. Mm-hmm. My original idea was Dockers Brewing Company. I was really set on that. I went and bought a lot of internet URLs for that as well. And then I got it the wrong way around. It was the cart before the horse. I should have talked to the intellectual property lawyers before buying the internet URLs, because they said it's a non-starter because Levi Strauss make Doccacinos and they have a global trademark. So I was like, okay. And Doc's Beers just sort of grew out organically out of that. We like it because it's 5 letters and then 5 letters, and they can sit well as words, one above each other and side by side. So yeah, and of course, as we discussed earlier, it's all about Grimsby. There's nothing more, that's about Grimsby than the Docks.
Absolutely. And I think, in that moment of inspiration, I think you have probably, and I've said this to you before, and I know you always blush and tell me not to be so stupid, but I think you've become, as a brand and as a business and as a destination, a poster boy for the possible. Because I think, in all honesty, anybody that knows Grimsby well, if you'd asked them 5 years ago, would the most successful or one of the most successful businesses in the area be down King Edward Street, the chances are most people would have giggled at you. But what you've actually done in a very, very short space of time is proven that entirely wrong, and proven that the notion of change and regeneration is entirely possible in a small town that's been waiting, I think, for somebody to show them the way. And I think you guys are doing that.
That's really flattering. It means a lot to hear that. Thank you very much, Richard. But I really want to convey that we're doing it from a passion about Grimsby.
Yeah.
It really does drive the business forward. And, you have to look at our cans, the designs on our cans, and the way that we communicate about Grimsby on social media. It's right at the top of the list of priorities in terms of the things we think about this town. And I speak as look, I love to think of myself as a Grimbarian. I've been here now 6 years.
Yep.
But you know, some people from the town may consider me as an outsider. I can tell you, as that person who has come from outside Grimsby, that it's not the thing. It's not the town that the press make out to be. It really does get a bad press, and we joke, you and I, Richard, about it. If it was called Niceby, as you always say, it would have
be way easier.
A lot better chance of getting a decent rep. But having Grim as its first syllable hasn't helped it. But you know, we want to change that perception, and I think that perception is changing. And as we talked about what's going on with the future of the town, with all the investment, the inward investment coming in, I think not just the UK, but globally, people are waking up to this. It's not a massive town, it's not a little town, but our hometown on, you know, this part of the coast. People are coming already from all over the world to look at the way that the offshore renewables teams are servicing and maintaining offshore wind turbine farms from our port. And you've got people from Singapore and America, and all the eyes in that industry are focused on this town. And that's a fantastic achievement for the town and the people who have brought offshore renewables. And, you know, I think Rob and the council have to be applauded for getting them here in the first place, because they could have gone to a number of places on the East Coast. Yeah.
It was touch and go, actually, as to whether they would. So, you know, it really was, you know, something, and is something to be proud of. I've told you this before, I sat and had lunch last year at Steele's with 9 Australian journalists from broadcast news as well as print news that had flown over just to see what Grimsby was doing right. And, you know, you tell that to somebody, they go, what? And it's like, well, you know, we are seen very, very differently than we believe we are. And I think once that change of vision and change of behaviour starts to gather momentum, which I believe it already is, by the way.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, you go to Scandinavian countries and to Iceland, and Grimsby's reputation is that they love the town.
Yeah.
There's a huge connection between, you know, there's a lot of Scandinavian heritage in this town, isn't there? There's a lot of people with Scandinavian roots.
Yeah.
And my wife, who was working within the fish industry with what she was doing, would travel to those countries and go, people just rave about Grimsby in Iceland. You don't understand. It's like Grimsby, and we will one day sell Dr. Beers in Iceland, I hope, because, you know, I think they would love to have it there to celebrate Grimsby, because it's a town that the people there appreciate.
Yes, agreed, absolutely. And you mentioned connections, and that gives me a very neat segue, because you talked earlier on about your early career in the business that is show and radio and so on and so forth. And it's probably no surprise then that what happened, 4 months ago, opened upstairs, that you find yourself back in the business of show with Doc's Academy.
Yeah. I'm really proud of what we built up there. I mean, I could take you on a tour because it's only up the stairs, but there's not particularly well lit up there. But it's a fantastic event space that benefits from the church's architecture. So when you walk up there, you walk into these vaulted ceilings and arched windows with a stage at one end, and we've gone black and white. The beams are black and the ceiling's white. So see where I'm going there.
I see where you're going there.
Faithful. And, you know, with fantastic flooring put down by GCW, plug for you there.
There you go.
Miles. You know, an even bigger bar upstairs with these fabulous, they're sort of industrial pipes. It's a bridge, an industrial tubular bridge where all our beer taps are, 2 of those, and they were made by good friends of ours, Paul and Brad, you know, amazing fabricators. And you've got this very spectacular space for arts and culture to happen. We hadn't changed it at all. We couldn't afford to do anything with it when we bought the building. So for 18 months, it lay sort of vacant, full of piles of bottles that we hadn't sold, or pallets that we couldn't get rid of, and stuff that was just taking up space. And we could see that there was scope, but we needed some money. So it took a while because we had to find some money. And I'm very pleased to say that we did find some money from a great organization called the Key Fund, who basically look at projects that have real social benefits in their community. And we felt strongly that Grimsby doesn't really have enough venues for arts and culture to happen. And that's not just our view. I mean, that's been found in surveys and reports and as well. So we pitched to them for some funding, which was a split of grant funding and a very good value for money loan. And they were persuaded, and they said, we want to back you to do this. So that was the catalyst to get that. I'll talk figures. That we had £100,000 in a loan and £50,000 as grant funding, and it's cost us a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But it was, without it, we would never have been able to start. So we're very grateful to them and to the DCMS, because it's a DCMS project. So DCMS has given us the grant funding and the key fund provider loan. So yeah, we now have this fantastic space for Grimsby. It's ready. It's just ready and waiting to be revived. We had 3 amazing nights of Lloyd Griffith doing his new stand-up tour in March. And then, of course, COVID-19 came along. But it was fantastic to see him. I mean, did you come to one of the shows, Richard?
No, I couldn't. I was away, funnily enough. You know, I saw all the reviews and the footage and what have you, and it did look absolutely amazing. And you know, it must have. What a range of emotions for you in that period of time, because I know how hard you all worked to get it open. I know how tired you were on that first night, but adrenaline got you through. And 3 nights into this wonderful new venue, and suddenly it's like shut the doors. And you know, March the whatever it was, 22nd. You know, suddenly you must have sat there in a cold sweat watching it all slide away. I mean, put yourself back in that headspace 3.5 months ago. What were you thinking?
I was gutted. There's no other word for it. We were looking at each other going, what happens next? Because no one knew about the furlough retention scheme.
Nope.
No one knew about the loans.
Nope.
No one knew what was coming in terms of the government support. And we could see potentially the collapse of the business.
Yep.
Not for long, because the government, I feel, were quite quick to begin to prop up. We were very lucky. Of course, there are some businesses that haven't been propped up at all, and I feel incredibly sorry for them. So we're very, very fortunate that we got that funding in. But you know, it was scary, and we won't. I don't know when we'll be doing the next arts or cultural event upstairs. In terms of, we've got sellout events that we've had to kick down the road. We've got new dates for them, but those dates are rapidly approaching, and it's very unlikely that we're going to be able to fulfill those dates. So we hope our audience will work with us, and we'll move the can down the road again and rearrange the gigs. I mean, we've got things lined up like another night of Lloyd and stereo MCs and Cock and the Zongo Brigade, and Tom Stade and this fabulous monthly comedy club as well. And all the tickets were selling. Thankfully, they're all lodged with C tickets who handle our ticket sales. So all those tickets and the money they're in is safe, and we haven't touched it. We're not allowed it until the events actually happen. So we're grateful to people who have bought tickets and are patiently waiting for the reopening of what will be, you know, I can't wait for that to happen, because it will be a great night.
Look, Grimsby waited 50 years for a brewery, you know, so I'm sure it can wait a few more weeks for a brewery with a fantastic event space upstairs. So I don't think you've got any fears there. You are absolutely a treasured business in this area, and don't forget it.
Thank you.
But of course, it's what you do, you know, while you're waiting. What do you do? I know you well enough to know that you won't sit still. So you've turned, as you said earlier on, you turned your hand to online sales. I've seen the pictures of the queues around the building for click and collect. So that, you know, this stuff, it's kind of nice, isn't it? Really. So you know, I think people will wait a plenty time for that to be available. But I gather, in another little twist of your show business career, you're becoming a cinema. Is that what I hear correctly?
You do hear correctly. Cinema was going to be a key strand of the Academy program. We wanted to have the occasional cult film screened up there. Not every day, not every week, but just every now and again to give an opportunity to some films that don't see the light of day in Grimsby. Understandably, there are some releases that don't hit the cinemas around us because they're not necessarily the big hits, the big commercial blockbusters. When I got a phone call about 3 weeks ago from a friend of ours called Jimmy Johnson, who helped us stage the Bouncers play that we did in the brewery about a year ago, Jimmy rang me up and said, look, the events industry has been decimated. Jimmy's a global rigger. He goes around the whole world on huge concert tours, and he's responsible for huge structures being lifted into the air, lighting structures. When lockdown came, he was working on the Script tour. So that tour was cancelled overnight, like all the tours around the world. And all these events teams and companies went into sort of suspended hibernation, suspended animation. And Jimmy and his colleagues have been twiddling their thumbs, and companies on the verge of collapse. And, you know, not Jimmy's, I hasten to add, but events companies around the world. Jimmy was quite keen to see something happening for his company in Grimsby, which is event show support. He trains up people to be involved with putting on events. And he knows a guy called Chris Gadd, who has an amazing, very large, super bright LED screen that usually goes on tour with the Australian Pink Floyd band all around the world.
Oh, like as the backdrop, stage backdrop.
Visuals.
Got it.
And Jimmy said, Chris is keen to see this screen used. What can we do with it? Have you thought about drive-ins? And I said, do you know what? I have thought about drive-ins, but the thing that put me off was the fact that if you have a projection drive-in, you can only show one film a day in the summer as the day gets darker, because ambient lighting means that the earlier in the day you can't really see the film. The thing about this screen is you can see it, and I've seen it set up. I went to see it the other day at 1 o'clock on a very sunny June afternoon, and it's pin sharp, bright, crystal clear. So when you watch it, you get this amazing visual experience, even though it's broad daylight. So I was like, we can do something with this. So Jimmy's bringing the staff, Chris is bringing the screen and the staging. Jimmy brings with him as well huge expertise, and Doc's Beers brings the promotion, and it brings with it the branding and hopefully a loyal audience that are happy to engage with what we're trying to do, because they know, I hope, from the music that we put on here and from the comedy stuff that we put on upstairs and the music we were going to do, that we're quite good at curating and staging things. And if we do it properly, which we will, the people trust us to do that.
And
so
you've got our friend Jordan involved as well.
Yes, I said you crop up. Yeah, Jordan Brompton's company, My Energy, which is this amazing renewables disruptor company. They make a great range of energy control hardware, like their super intelligent electric vehicle chargers, and they convert your energy, your own solar and wind energy, and their machines can actually be told when to charge with your energy and when to take cheap energy from the grid, and it's all done from an app. It's genius, and it's the way of the future. So I thought, well, they're not, most of them won't be electric cars, but Jordan might be interested in this because it's a good opportunity to be a headline sponsor at a local event. We'd wanted to work with her on something in the academy anyway, but of course with lockdown and COVID-19, that was going to be possible. And Jordan and My Energy said, yeah, we'd love to back you. So they've contributed to our setup fund very generously. And they're now, emblazoned across all the branding, and they'll be on screen in the adverts and in all our social media. We'll always reference them because we're very grateful to the input they've given us.
So some of the powerhouse businesses of Grimsby then have come together, that's good. That's good. That we'll keep that. Yeah. We'll put that on the poster.
Yeah, we're saying it's a fully charged drive-in.
I like that. I like that a lot. And so when's it start? When's the first showing?
It's Friday the 10th of July. We kick off with Dirty Dancing, and then later on Pretty Woman. And we've got things like Alien and The Goonies and A Star is Born, Finding Nemo. There's 14 films across 7 days.
And how many showings? If the screen works during the day, are you able to do multiple showings?
We're doing 2 shows a day across 7 days. So 100 cars a show. That means 1,400 cars potentially over 7 days.
Wow.
But only 100 cars at a time, which is going to be eminently manageable. We're doing it at Linden Homes, the home of Cleethorpes Town of Sea. So, you know, there's not going to be a huge amount of traffic. It's only 100 cars.
Yep.
And from a residential perspective, the soundtrack has been played out. We've become radio broadcasters for 2 weeks. We're playing it on car radios. So people will tune into an FM frequency to hear sound.
And you're back to radio again. See, this little
I
world.
hadn't even thought about that.
This little world keeps going around. And tell me, because I know you're itching to tell me, where can people buy tickets?
They can buy tickets from docsdrivein.com. That's docsdrivein.com, and you can get tickets to all the shows from there.
Fantastic. And they're on sale now, is that right?
They're on sale right now, as I live and breathe, and it costs £27.50 per car. So you can bring as many people as you're legally allowed to seat in your car within that price.
I like that. Nice touch. So really, Will, you know, what we're hearing here is just another sort of example of the way that your very clever mind works to see not only, I think, what needs to be done, but what people would like to be done. You seem to have facilitated a need that was latent and that was sat there in the ground waiting for somebody to come along and open the opportunity. And with docs, I mean, you talked about the dating stuff, you know, so that was something that people didn't do, and then they did.
Look where that's gone now. Yeah, well, I mean, it's
but you know, don't underestimate your position in all of these things, because you are very much a spark for these ideas.
Well, that's really kind of you to say so. I mean, it's not possible without my, fellow directors, Shaz and Mike. I mean, we have a great team. Mike runs the brewing, Shaz runs the tap room and our production schedules, and I'm doing lots and lots of other things. Anything from branding to working with S4 and our web design to social media, finding new opportunities for expansion of the business, that kind of thing. But the three of us, I think we've hit on a really, it's a great trio, and I don't think any of it's possible without that three minds coming together. So I do want to pay tribute to those guys.
No, absolutely, and that's what I like about you, Will, is your willingness to do that, and I think it shouldn't be overlooked. So I congratulate you for that, and actually I congratulate you for all of it. I haven't known you for very long. Everything that I've seen you do, you've got right, and that just seems to be a trait that is within you, which is impressive to say the least.
Well, we talk about serendipity, don't we?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of there's luck involved as well. Luck and timing. People say you make your own luck, but if the timing's wrong, the luck won't count. And we're lucky to be here now, doing what we're doing now, as this sleeping giant of a town slowly wakes from its slumber and is going to take on not just this country, but the world.
You talk about timing. You're not opening this weekend.
No, we don't think it's the right time to open. We're a little bit worried. We're really, really anxious for our customers and staff. If there's any weekend when people are going to not have as much common sense, to use that expression, as they might do usually, it's when everything opens. And I kind of wish we'd had a staged opening, because you think the hotels are opening at the same time, I think, and the pubs are opening at the same time, and the cafes are. So everyone's out, and there's people coming into the area from outside of Northeast Lincolnshire to stay, because I think I may be wrong on this, but I think some of the big
hotels,
holiday parks are opening as well.
Yeah. And
you just go, this is a perfect storm. So we're taking a wait and see, measured approach. We're still working on our processes and our layouts here. And we'll go probably later this month. I'm not even going to say the date yet, because we really want to see what happens this weekend. I'm very mindful that there's, I believe, a spike in Doncaster. There's a spike in Leicester. And that's from people coming together. I'm sure it's from people coming together. So we just need to be, I feel we just need to be measured and wait and see.
Well, as you know, with age comes wisdom. And I think you are displaying plenty of it in that decision, and I absolutely tip my hat to you, because it must be so tempting as a business that's been without income, well, largely without its main source of income for the best part of 4 months, to say, do you know what, we'll wait this one out. I think that's very wise.
It's kind of you, Richard. I mean, it is tricky. I mean, you talk about income, and we have things to balance. Like, a lot of our staff are furloughed in order to get our building ready for the 4th of July. And we've got 7,000 square foot of space here that has to be turned into a COVID-19 safe building. It would mean unfurloughing staff in June, which would, for a few days, which would have meant we lost their entire furlough payments for the month.
Yeah. Because
in June, you couldn't be part-time furlough. So that just financially just doesn't stack up for us. We can't afford to do that. So look, I would be lying to say that there is not an income and income balancing act going on here as well. But it's 99% about the safety of staff and customers.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, well, I tip my hat to you, Will. And listen, thank you for joining me tonight. I think you probably win the prize so far in Grimbarians as the best location, because anybody that can sit in a brewery. You've got a beer there, haven't you? Did I see you with a beer earlier?
I have been drinking a hard graft.
Excellent. Well, I raise my glass to you. It's lovely to see you. I haven't seen you for long enough. And
I look forward to seeing you here, and I hope that the viewers that are watching us, who've taken their time to watch us, can come, who haven't seen us yet, and check us out. We'll look after you. No, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Richard. Thank you.
If they don't see you in the brewery, of course, they can see you at the drive-in, docsdrivein.com. There we go. I got it in again. So listen, Will, thank you for being my guest. Thank you for being an excellent ambassador for Grimbarians. And just on behalf, I think, of so many people that have had such a wonderful time inside the church over the last 18 months or so, and more to come, thank you from them. And I will look forward to seeing you very soon indeed.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Take care, mate.
You too.